Hello Year 9, I hope you've been keeping well during these troubling times of ours. Today we'll be looking at the beginning of Act 2 of An Inspector Calls. Hopefully by now you will have read the first act. If you haven't, your teacher should have attached a PDF of the script to class charts, so please take the time to finish reading the first act now. To start us off with, for your do now, I'd like you to write 5 details which has happened in the first act. Don't worry about writing them in chronological order, so the order that they happened in the play. Simply write 5 facts which you can remember from the text. Pause the video now. Okay, I'm going to give you a brief summary of the first act. If you have missed any of these details, please jot them down now. The mysterious Inspector Goole interrupts a wealthy family's party to tell them a young woman has committed suicide that night. What's this got to do with them? One by one they will find out as their dark secrets are revealed. The Burling family are celebrating Sheila's engagement to Gerald. It all seems to be going well, but Sheila suspects that Gerald lost interest in her last summer. Mr. Burling gives the young men, Eric and Gerald, a speech about business. He says that every man should look after himself. Inspector Goole arrives and says that a woman called Eva Smith has committed suicide by drinking disinfectant. He starts to question the family members one by one. It turns out Arthur Burling sacked Eva Smith from his factory for striking in protest against low wages, and that Sheila asked for Eva Smith to be sacked from Millwards, a department store, last year. Upon learning that Eva Smith changed her name to Daisy Renton, Gerald's reaction gives him away as having known her. Sheila notices this. This is how our first act ends. If you attempted the Star Challenge, Mr. Burling personifies capitalism, so he's the embodiment of capitalism. Today we'll be understanding how to discuss Priestley's viewpoint, and we'll be doing this to be able to analyse his intention in writing the play, so why he wrote the play, and we'll be doing this by reading an extract from Act 2 and analysing it. I'd like you to look up the word perspective if you don't already know it. You can use your dictionaries for this or a device. And for a star challenge, can you please try and write down a sentence or two to explain what Priestley's perspective might be? Pause the video now. Your perspective is your point of view. People's point of view varies greatly due to their life experiences. For instance, in a political election, an elderly Englishman might have a different perspective on a certain party winning than a young woman from a mixed ethnic background, for instance. What can you remember about socialism and capitalism? Write your own definitions for these. Also, which characters as a star challenge might represent socialism? Pause the video now. I'm just going to read from the slides, so add to your notes. Socialism means that people in society work together to take care of each other so that everyone has what they need. Socialists believe that all people, no matter their class or background, deserve to have a decent place to live and enough food to eat. Under socialism, all people should be able to get medical attention when they need it, warm clothes for the cold winter, a good education, and the ability to develop to their fullest potential. This is achieved by people paying taxes, and those taxes being appropriately divvied out into different sectors. For example, you don't need to pay out of your own pocket to come to school today, because my teacher wages are already paid for by the people. Likewise, as you get older and have a job, your taxes will help to fund things like the fire service and the NHS. But if heaven forbid something happens and you are no longer able to work, you should still be looked after by our valuable services. Under capitalism, people compete for almost everything. Capitalists believe that it's fair to compete for jobs, for the best education, for housing, even for the basic necessities of life. They believe that those who are rich should be able to keep the money that they have and not have to share it, and that those who are poor should work harder to gain a better life. Capitalism is about people fending for themselves and not helping everyone to be equal. If you did the Star Challenge, the main socialist character in this is the inspector, though he does help some of the others to understand social responsibility. He makes his biggest impact on Sheila Burling. Here's a little true or false quiz about socialism and capitalism. Pause the video now to give it a go. Number 1. Socialists believe that wealth should be shared equally in society. This is true. Number 2 is also true. The NHS was born out of the socialist principles of the Labour Party after World War II, a time where people desperately needed medical attention and there was widespread poverty due to the war having ended. Number 3 is false. Socialists believe if you earn more money, you should pay more taxes to help those in need, for instance, the poor, the sick and the elderly. Number 4, this is true. Capitalists don't believe in giving people things for free. And number 5 is false. Trump is 100% a capitalist. Here's some vocabulary from the extract we're going to read today which you might not know. If you don't know them, please write the word and their definitions. Hysterical was a non-politically correct word used to describe a panic-stricken and anxious woman. Vindictive means mean or cruel. If you are impressionable, you are easily influenced. Impertinent means rude. As I play the audio clip of the text being read, I'm also going to have the text up on the slides so you can follow them. However, I would also recommend that you open your PDF to page 25 so you can go back and look for quotations. As we are reading, for an absolute minimum for a bronze challenge, I'd like you to write 3 quotations which show us Sheila's perspective on responsibility, so her point of view. For silver, you need to do bronze and write 2 quotations which show us the inspector's perspective on responsibility. And finally, if you want to do gold, you need to do both bronze and silver as well, and then write 1 quotation which shows us Mrs. Burling's perspective on responsibility. And also remember, the quotation doesn't have to be spoken by the mentioned character. Someone else could be talking about them. Some of the aspects of the audio will be different to what you are reading. Just quote from the text, not the audio.
Well, Mr. Croft?
What did I tell you?
Inspector, I think Miss Burling ought to be excused any more of this questioning. She's had an exciting day. We were celebrating our engagement, you know. Now she's obviously had about as much as she can stand.
He means I'm getting hysterical.
Well, I've no more questions to ask.
But you haven't finished asking questions, have you?
No.
Then I'm staying.
Why? It's bound to be unpleasant and disturbing.
And you think young women ought to be protected against unpleasant and disturbing things?
If possible, yes.
Well, we know one young woman who wasn't, don't we?
I suppose I asked for that.
Be careful you don't ask for any more, Gerald.
I only meant to say why stay when you'll hate it.
It can't be any worse for me than it has been. And it might be better.
I see.
What?
You've been put through it, and now you want to see somebody else put through it.
So that's what you think I'm like? I'm glad I realised it in time.
No, I didn't mean...
Yes, you did. And if you'd really loved me, you couldn't have said that. You listened to that story about me. I got that girl sacked from Millwoods, and now you've made up your mind I must obviously be a selfish, vindictive creature.
I neither said that nor even suggested it.
Then why say I want to see somebody else put through it? That's not what I meant at all.
All right, then. I'm sorry.
Yes, but you don't believe me. And this is just the wrong time not to believe me.
I can tell you why Miss Burling wants to stay. A girl died tonight. A pretty, lively sort of girl who never did any harm. But she died in misery and agony, hating life.
I know, and I can't stop thinking about it.
Miss Burling has been made to understand what she did to this girl. She feels responsible. If she leaves now and doesn't hear any more, then she'll feel she's entirely to blame. She'll be alone with her responsibility. The rest of tonight, all tomorrow, all the next night.
Yes, that's it. And I know I'm to blame, and I'm desperately sorry. But I can't believe, I won't believe it's simply my fault that in the end she committed suicide. That would be too horrible.
You see, we have to share something. If there's nothing else, we have to share our guilt.
Good evening, Inspector.
Good evening, madam.
I'm Mrs. Burling. My husband has just explained why you're here, and while we'll be glad to tell you anything you want to know, I don't think we can help you much.
No, Mother.
Whatever's the matter, Sheila?
You're beginning all wrong. And I'm afraid you'll say something or do something that you'll be sorry for afterwards.
I don't know what you're talking about.
We all started like that. So confident, so pleased with ourselves until he began asking us questions.
You seem to have made a great impression on this child, Inspector.
We often do on the young ones. They're more impressionable.
Go to bed, dear. You'll feel better in the morning.
Nothing could be worse for me, Mother. I'm staying here until I know why that girl killed herself.
Nothing but morbid curiosity.
It isn't.
Please don't contradict me like that. In any case, I don't suppose for a moment that we can understand why the girl committed suicide. Girls of that class...
Mother, don't. For your own sake as well as ours, you mustn't build up...
Mustn't? Really, Sheila?
You mustn't build up a kind of wall between us and that girl. If you do, the inspector will just break it down. And it'll be all the worse when he does.
She's right.
I beg your pardon.
I said she's right.
I consider that a trifle impertinent, Inspector. Now, what is it, Sheila?
I don't know. Perhaps it's just because impertinent is such a silly word.
In any case...
Mother, do stop before it's too late.
If you mean that the Inspector will take offence...
No, I never take offence.
I'm glad to hear it. Though it seems to me that we have more reason for taking offence.
You may have got some different quotations from me, and that's fine. Here are 3 I've found for Sheila's take on responsibility. I know I'm to blame, and I'm desperately sorry. She admits she's to blame for Eva's death, but she doesn't think it's solely her fault, as she doesn't think she committed suicide purely because Sheila got her fired from Millwoods, which is a fair assumption. The second one is from the inspector. When Gerald tells Sheila to leave the room, as he clearly doesn't want his fiancée to hear details of his sordid affair, the inspector chimes in with, if she leaves now, she'll feel she's entirely to blame, which is a fair assumption as she won't know anyone else's involvement with Eva Smith or Daisy Renton, as she's also known. Finally, here Sheila is using a metaphor when explaining to her mother, you mustn't put a kind of wall between us and that girl, which shows that by constantly viewing girls from working class background as different from themselves, her mother is putting a barrier between them which doesn't allow her to see things from the girl's point of view, therefore she lacks any empathy towards her. For the Silver Challenge, once again the inspector is talking about Sheila leaving the room when he says she'll be alone with her responsibility. This links to the quotation from the Bronze Challenge. Essentially, the inspector is hinting that responsibility is shared and that they all had a part to play in it. It would be unfair for Sheila to think it was all her fault. The second quote is a great one to memorise for your exam. You see, we have to share something. If there's nothing else, we have to share our guilt. This is a brilliant quotation which shows us both the inspector and Priestley's perspective on the shared social responsibility our actions have on one another. Finally, for the Gold Challenge, Mrs. Burling says, I don't suppose for a moment we can understand why the girl committed suicide. Girls of that class. This really reveals that Mrs. Burling doesn't think her family are in any way responsible for Eva Smith's death. Her very disparaging statement of girls of that class is thankfully cut short by Sheila, but it reveals how quick Mrs. Burling is to dismiss the young girl's suicide as something disreputable that a working class girl would do over someone who has her own wealth. Unfortunately, it was the awful events of Eva's life which led to her desperate situation of drinking disinfectant. Yet Mrs. Burling doesn't see it as her family's responsibility, despite the fact that they all personally knew Eva Smith and all played a part in making her life very difficult. Your main task for today is to create a mind map of the different quotations linked to responsibility. You may use the quotes I've provided, or you can use your own. For the bronze challenge, you must explain what each quote suggests and link it to responsibility. For your silver challenge, you must do bronze and consider the message Priestley is trying to get across to his audience. Remember, it is a play, so we write about the audience and not the reader. Finally, for gold, you must do bronze and silver and link your quotation to either capitalism or socialism. As a challenge, spot devices and consider their impact. I've already given you some ideas about the quotes, but the more you can write about what it suggests and the more deeply you can analyse and pull apart a quote, the more marks you'll get in your exam. Pause the video now. Finally, for your review exercise, I'd like you to go back to our what, which was to understand how to discuss the writer's viewpoint when we were discussing our learning outcomes. Remember, the inspector is often thought of as the author's voice, so Priestley's mouthpiece. Therefore, I'd like you to write no more than a few sentences summing up Priestley's viewpoint so far in the play. As a challenge, link your answer to socialism. Pause the video now to give that a go. Well done Year 9 for getting this far. I hope you found it useful. Can you please send the work you've done today to your English teacher? Take care. Bye.